this is from, by chance?
Wait. So are you starting? Because your attention starts the time.
This is just the hook. The attention starts the time?
All right, so you need to put eyes on me and give me, and then I'm going to start the time, and then that's when you can start. All right?
Should have gone last week.
Right? Because that's part of the brief.
Okay. Yes, sir?
Okay.
We're starting right now. Kevin Smith, what movie is that from?
Star Wars?
Star Wars is correct. Now, Cadet McGregor and I see is thinking to herself, now that seems pretty far-fetched. X-Wings? Come on. In fact, it's not really that far-fetched. With a lot of new developments in technology, we're actually getting a lot closer to this sort of technology. And furthermore, the development of moons on the base and independent Space Force will actually help us get to those technologies sooner rather than later. So, good afternoon, Captain Smith, fellow cadets. I'm Cadet 3rd Class Taylor Gunnels.
I'm Cadet 3rd Class Michelle Ross.
And today we'll be briefing you on bases on the moon and an independent Space Force.
Why a base on the moon? Today we're going to overview why a base on the moon. What is a Space Force? The moon base appearance, the proponents of the Space Force. Are moon bases realistic? Really? The opposition to a Space Force, the U.S. Air Force's role. The debate, summary, the sources we use, and we'll entertain any questions.
Alright, so why a moon base? It seems like a pretty kind of weird thing to think about. Why would we want a base on the moon? But there's a lot of reasons. These are reasons that NASA has listed. Obviously, so you think about human civilization, we can colonize the moon, start moving out in the solar system, start branching out humanity. Obviously, having a base on the moon, we can do a lot of research, do a lot of things with science, exploration, and we're going to be ready to move out into the rest of the galaxy. And then, obviously, putting someone on the moon is a really big thing for public relations, and it gets everyone excited about the space program. And also, you can mine things on the moon, so you have opportunities to make money, which obviously funding is going to be a big issue for this. So all these things are going to help actually make a moon base realistic. And then for the Air Force, why does the Air Force care about this? For defense, if we are really adept at moving throughout space, we're going to be really good at defense. We can defend our satellites, we can stop intercontinental ballistic missiles from being fired, we can end nuclear warfare essentially, if we can control those satellites and control airspaces. If we're on the moon, no one else can be on the moon. We can easily stop them from getting to the moon. And R&D, obviously, lasers, things like that. Obviously, one of the bases is definitely going to help those.
Okay, what is the idea of an independent Space Force? It's the debate whether or not the United States should add the military branch's 4th service branch. Senator Bob Smith of New Hampshire is a huge proponent of this. He believes that this is essential, and if the Air Force and the government will not separately move to do this, he will try to enact Congress to pass a legislation bringing about a 4th service branch called the Space Force.
Alright, so the appearance of moon base. It's kind of what you would expect, just like on that picture over there. So you're going to have essentially just these little modules, and that's where people are going to live. People are going to do research there. There will be kind of like moon buggies, but a lot more advanced because moon buggies were made like 40 years ago. So we're going to have a lot more advanced technology moving about. Actually, these are all going to be underground though, because there's a lot of radiation out in the moon, out in space. So these are all be underground, but that's what it'll look like. Most likely we'll be on the South Pole because there's a lot of ice there to sustain the population. If we do end up doing a lot of mining, in fact, we're going to need a lot of robotic help because mining is a dangerous thing. Mining in space is super dangerous, so robots will help with safety issues. And the base will probably be quite mobile, especially if we're doing research. Being on different places on the moon is going to absolutely help that research move along and advance technology.
So the proponents for the idea of a separate Space Force. Space operations are fundamentally different and need to be addressed as such. Space is different than air. Space system is needed to project and protect military power. There needs to be a separate doctrine that separates air and space, as air and space are 2 different places. The physical laws are different, the positive and negatives are different, how you access each area is different. In order to enter space, much more energy is needed. However, to travel through space, less energy is needed. And there is the proponent issue of the fact of national sovereignty. Space doesn't belong to anyone, just the same as international waters doesn't necessarily belong to anyone. So therefore, we have a duty to protect just the same as international waters.
Alright, so now you might be saying to yourself, moon bases, alright, cool idea. Are they realistic? Well, 42 years ago, just about, Neil Armstrong landed on the moon, and see that calculator in the bottom right-hand corner? NASA put him on the moon with the computing power of that calculator. So think about how much technology we have today and how much computing power we have. It's absolutely realistic technologically that we can get to the moon and we can put people on the moon and we can keep them on the moon. Unfortunately, funding is obviously a big issue. We're going through budget cuts in the Air Force. If the super committee doesn't get their budget in, we're going to go through a lot more cuts. And obviously putting someone on the moon doesn't seem like a big national issue right now, especially with the economy. So funding is obviously an issue for the moon base, and ownership. Who owns it? There's a treaty a while back in 1969 that said that everyone owns it, mankind owns it, but the United States never signed it. So it's definitely an issue to consider.
There are obviously oppositions to the idea of a separate space force. In January 2010, the National Security Report on Space Threat Analysis declared that the disadvantages outweigh the advantages, and it would cost way more money than protection is worth. There are sovereignty issues. The space is not under any state-specific sovereignty, and it's currently an international peace zone, so this would create an issue. The expense of energy to get to space is quite a lot and obviously costs an extreme amount of money, and it's difficult. The monetary costs are one of the huge setbacks, is the fact that protecting and developing in space would need a large funding budget, which we are currently lacking. We would also need a critical mass of personnel, which we do not have. Continued opposition. There's the arms race counter-argument. There are no weapons in space right now. No one has space weapons. So if we put them up there, and other people, other nations decide to put weapons up there, we are essentially less secure than we were before with no space weapons at all. Right now, we are at pre-World War I air power technology equivalency. So if you can think in your minds what our technology was like pre-World War I with airplanes, that's where we are right now with space technology. Also, there's a lack in the level of warfighting to justify even developing a space force. There's no current conflict, there's no reason right now to develop a space force. And like I said, crossing an international threshold. Are we ready to disturb this quote-unquote international peaceful place? The Department of Defense has declared that the Air Force is the executive agent for space, as we cover air, space, and cyberspace. So this is another argument right here.
All right, now the U.S. Air Force role in this. You may be thinking, well, I'm in the Air Force uniform right now. What does this mean to me? So currently, the Air Force is actually taking on more space-related technologies and operations. We're currently developing the X-37B, which is by Boeing, and essentially, it's kind of like a replacement to the space shuttle, but it's unmanned. It can be unmanned, so obviously reducing the risk to human life is obviously going to help the space program, carry up and maybe develop based on the moon and get an independent space force. The X-37B is also scheduled to have weapons when the weapons have been researched and developed. The weapons will be on there, so we can have capabilities to strike anywhere and even in space. So obviously, as an Air Force, core competency is technology to warfighting. Obviously, this is a great example of using technology to fight wars. Space superiority, that's a clear goal of the X-37B, and global attack. If we're in space, we can attack anyone, anywhere, anytime. So that's clear why the Air Force's role is really important here.
Currently, there's an ongoing debate. Theory and doctrine are undefined. We have defined theory and doctrine for the Air Force, but not a space force. So we would need an environment to foster this, like the Air Corps Tactical Training School that was developed in the days of Billy Mitchell. We would need to be able to figure out what the doctrine would be, just the same as they researched and developed high-altitude precision bombing, which turned into heavy bombing like we have today. There's also competition for funding inside the Air Force. Right now, the space branch is part of the Air Force, so it is competing directly with other areas and aspects, as in terrorism and national sovereignty, inside the Air Force. So technically, being a part of the Air Force is holding down the idea of a space force. Now, the ultimate conclusion is that, will a space force be necessary? Yes, absolutely. But the question is it capable to happen today, or will it happen anytime soon? In summary, today we went over why we need a moon base, what is a space force, the moon base appearance, proponents of a space force, are moon bases realistic really, the opposition to a space force, the U.S. Air Force's role, and the debate. These are our sources. This concludes our briefing. Do you have any questions?
All right, so one last thing. This is Billy Mitchell, everyone. So think about Billy Mitchell way back in the day. He was saying, the Air Force is just kind of like, a little tie-in branch to the Army, and that's what the Space Force is right now. So putting bases on the moon is absolutely kind of paralleling what Billy Mitchell did with the independent Air Force. So putting base on the moon one day is going to get us to that independent Space Force, and you'll all see soon.
Cadet Gunnels and I are in the Billy Mitchell of today.